All right, let's talk about a huge idea, spiritual power. But maybe we've been thinking about it all wrong. What if it's not some force out there that we have to pray to, but something that's already right here, inside, just waiting to work through us? Let's dive in.
So, to kick things off, we're going to start with a puzzle. It's a bit of a paradox, really, and it seriously challenges the way a lot of us think about divine power and how it operates in the world.
Okay, so here's the question at the heart of it all. If there's this all-powerful, ever-present God or divine force, why didn't it just fix everything? Why were people like Moses or the Buddha or Jesus even necessary? Why did it seem to take these specific individuals to bring healing and liberation to the world?
And this is where we get to the core idea we're going to unpack today. The sources we're looking at suggest that this power is constant, kind of like gravity. It's always there, but it needs a human channel to actually manifest here on Earth. The real mind-bender is shifting from the idea of a God who acts on the world to a spiritual power that can only act through us.
Okay, so to really get this whole channel concept, we first have to get on the same page about what we even mean by consciousness. Because honestly, it's the key piece of the puzzle. Once you get this, everything else just clicks into place.
So what is consciousness according to these teachings? Well, it's not just your thoughts, your emotions, or your personality. Think bigger. Think of it as this all-pervading, space-like presence. It's the silent witness to everything you experience, but it has no form of its own. I love the analogy of the space in a room. The space holds the chairs, the table, the lamp, but it isn't any of those things. It's the silent, aware space that allows everything else to exist.
All right, so if consciousness itself is pure and formless, then where does all the suffering come from? Good question, right? Well, the sources say it's basically a case of mistaken identity. The problem starts the moment this universal awareness looks at a temporary physical body and says, "That's me." It creates this sense of a separate I, a little me that's cut off from everything else, and that is the identity that suffers, that fears, that feels alone. Now, hang on, because the sources get even more specific here. It's a subtle distinction, but it's super important. They talk about universal consciousness. That's the whole show, the entire field of experience, everything that is manifested. It's the highest God, if you will, but it's still temporary. But then, there's something behind even that. They call it the absolute. This is the ultimate, timeless, spaceless reality. It's the source from which consciousness itself bubbles up and where it eventually goes back to. Okay, so we've got these big cosmic ideas, universal consciousness, the absolute. But how does any of this relate to you and me, to an individual person? How do we go from being this little separate me to being a channel for that bigger reality?
This quote just nails it, doesn't it? God is of no avail to us except as we open our consciousness and become transparencies through which God can shine. That power is always there, but it's no use to us unless we become a clear medium. And that idea of becoming a transparency leads to a really fantastic analogy. This is probably my favorite way to think about it. Imagine that this divine presence, this power, is the sun. It's always there, always shining, 24/7. Now, imagine our normal human state of consciousness, full of fear, worry, identification with the body, is like a dirty, closed window. It blocks the light, it blocks the warmth, but what happens when you clean that window and open it up? The sun just pours in, right? The sun didn't change. It was always there. The only thing that changed was the state of the window. Our consciousness is the window.
And look, this isn't just some new age idea. The sources show this pattern playing out throughout history. Think about it. Gautama wasn't the Buddha, the enlightened one, his whole life. It was after he had his great awakening that these healing works started to happen through him. Same with Jesus. He wasn't the Christ until he had this profound inner realization, this anointing, and then the miracles followed. In every case, it was a shift in their personal consciousness that opened the floodgates. Okay, so what this all boils down to is that there are basically two completely different ways to live. Two totally different states of being, based on where you're coming from.
And this chart lays it out perfectly. On one side, you've got material consciousness. Its default emotion, fear of the future. Its identity, I am this body, I am my problems. But on the other side, you have spiritual consciousness. The core feeling there is assurance, right here in the present. And its identity isn't the body, it's that inner witnessing presence. One is a life focused on what might happen, and the other is grounded in the I am of right now. They're like two different worlds.
Let's dig into that material consciousness for a second. The key insight here is pretty profound. Almost all of our fear is about the future. Think about it. You're not really scared of the sniffle you have today. You're scared it's going to turn into the flu next week. You're not scared of your bank balance right now. You're scared of what it means for paying rent next month. It's a life lived in constant, anxious projection about what might go wrong.
So how does spiritual consciousness deal with that? It completely short-circuits the whole mechanism. It brings all your awareness back to the only time that actually exists, right now. It's about realizing there is this constant, unshakable inner presence, this deep sense of I am that is with you always. If that presence is here right now, then why worry about tomorrow? There's a great line in the source material. If you make your bed in hell, I am there. When you feel that, fear just doesn't have a leg to stand on.
And this leads us to the final section, and honestly, maybe the most important takeaway of all. What is the point of this? Is it just to feel a little better? No. It's about a complete and total transformation.
Here's the really crucial distinction to make. The goal isn't just healing your body or fixing your financial problems. According to these teachings, those things are just side effects. They're added things. The real work, the primary goal, is the transformation of your consciousness itself, that renewing of the mind. When you shift from a material to a spiritual awareness, the outer stuff starts to take care of itself.
And this is where it gets really mind-blowing. The power of one person who achieves this state of being is immense. It's not just about them. They become like a tuning fork. By vibrating at this new frequency, they can literally ignite that same potential in thousands of other people just by their presence.
You know, think about how this kind of wisdom used to spread. It was slow, it was word of mouth. A teacher might spend their whole life reaching a few dozen, maybe a few hundred people. But now, we're in a completely different era. We have books, TV, the internet, airplanes. An insight that happens in a monastery in Tibet can be on a screen in Ohio in seconds. The potential for transmitting this consciousness has just exploded.
And this is what makes this so incredibly hopeful. The sources suggest that maybe we're not waiting for one single perfect Christ or Buddha to come and save us. Maybe what's needed now is for thousands or even millions of us to get just a grain of this consciousness, just a little bit of that freedom from fear, a little bit of that awareness of the inner I am. The collective impact of that could be more powerful than anything the world has ever seen. So I want to leave you with this thought. We've explored this principle that one transformed individual can change the world around them. But the real question for us today is this: what happens when it's not just one? What happens when thousands, maybe millions of us start to clean our own window and let that same light shine through?